Let us pray. Our Father, we confidently ask for your strength and encouragement in our service of you through the service of others. We humbly ask for your gift of wisdom to guide us in making good laws and good decisions for the present and the future of Alberta. Amen.
Introduction of visitors. Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Chairman, the member for Whitecourt, I request leave to present the report of the special committee appointed to prepare lists of members to serve on the select standing committees of the Assembly.
Notices of motions. Introduction of bills.
Request leave to introduce Bill 261, an act to amend the Individuals' Rights Protection Act. This bill would amend the act to include sexual orientation and mental disability as grounds on which discrimination would be prohibited in such areas as advertising, employment, tenancy agreements, and membership in trade and professional organizations.
Having heard the motion by the honourable member for Edmonton Centre with respect to first reading of Bill number 261, an act to amend the Individuals' Rights Protection Act, does the Assembly agree to the motion for first reading? Opposed, if any? So ordered.
A bill being an act to amend the Individuals' Rights Protection Act, introduced by Honourable Member Reverend Roberts, is now read a first time.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, this is an act that will address the problem of the ownership of foreign ownership of land in Alberta. The bill would amend the act to require every person buying or holding land in Alberta to file a statement of that person's residence and whether or not they are a Canadian citizen with the Registrar of Land Titles. In addition, the bill would require that the registrar prepare a report showing the extent of foreign land holdings in the province every year. I pray leave, Speaker.
The honourable member for Edmonton Strathcona has moved first reading of Bill number 231, an act to amend the Land Titles Act. Does the Assembly agree to the motion for first reading? Opposed? Carried.
A bill being an act to amend the Land Titles Act, introduced by Honourable Member Mr. Wright, is now read a first time.
I request leave to introduce a bill number 219, Indigenous Cultural Properties Reclamation Act. The bill would amend the Foreign Cultural Property Immunity Act to exclude all cultural property originally discovered, made, created, produced, built, crafted, or constructed in what is now Alberta from the Act's provision.
The honourable member for Athabasca Lac La Biche has moved first reading of Bill 219, the Indigenous Cultural Properties Reclamation Act. Does the Assembly agree to the motion for first reading? Opposed? So ordered.
A bill being Indigenous Cultural Properties Reclamation Act, introduced by Honourable Member Mr. Piquet, is now read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce Bill 248, an act to amend the Landlord and Tenant Act. The bill would do two things. One, place definitions of both tenant and landlord in the Act, clearly specifying, among other things, that the duties and responsibilities of a landlord dissolve in whole onto her or his successor as landlord. And two, create a requirement that tenant security deposits be held in separate trust accounts, apart from monies belonging to the landlord and not form a part of his assets.
The honourable member for Edmonton Kingsway has moved first reading of Bill 248, an act to amend the Landlord and Tenant Act. Does the Assembly agree to the motion for first reading? Opposed? Carried.
A bill being an act to amend the Landlord and Tenant Act, introduced by Honourable Member Mr. McEachern, is now read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce Bill 246, an act to amend the Highway Traffic Act. Mr. Speaker, this bill will amend the present act to reduce the period that a motor vehicle may be left on a highway or on a public property without permission from 72 hours to 24 hours. Basically, this bill will prohibit anyone from abandoning a vehicle on a highway in Alberta, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Clover Bar has moved first reading of Bill 246, an act to amend the Highway Traffic Act. Does the Assembly agree to this motion for first reading? Opposed? Carried.
A bill being an act to amend the Highway Traffic Act, introduced by Honourable Member Dr. Buck, is now read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce Bill 245, an act to amend the Clean Water Act. This is a supplement to Bill 240, the right to clean water.
The honourable member for Little Bow has moved first reading of Bill 245, an act to amend the Clean Water Act. Does the Assembly agree to the motion? Opposed? So ordered.
A bill being an act to amend the Clean Water Act, introduced by Honourable Member Mr. Speaker, is now read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I request leave to introduce Bill number 215, the University of the Peace Act. This bill, Mr. Speaker, would amend the Universities Act to create the University of the Peace, the main campus of which would be situated in the city of Grand Prairie, with subsidiary campuses at no fewer than 5 smaller centres throughout the Peace, and with an emphasis on distance learning and innovative uses of new technology.
The honourable member for Edmonton Mill Woods has moved first reading of Bill 215, the University of the Peace Act. Does the Assembly agree to the motion for first reading? Opposed? Carried.
A bill being University of the Peace Act, introduced by Honourable Member Mr. Gibault, is now read a first time. Tabling returns and reports. Introduction of special guests.
Speaker, I have the great pleasure today, during this week of gay and lesbian awareness, to introduce to you and through you to all members of this Assembly several members of my constituency and neighboring Edmonton constituencies who have worked to promote Gala Week through various organizations such as Gay Alliance Toward Equality, or GATE, Women's Space, the AIDS Network of Edmonton, and other such organizations. I ask, Mr. Speaker, on this unprecedented day that they rise from their seats in the visitors' gallery and receive the warm welcome of this legislative assembly. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I have the pleasure to introduce the Director and several members of the Canadian Mental Health Association who work for the CMHA at this very important work throughout the province at regional offices, but who are in Edmonton today and are eager to observe the proceedings of this legislature. May I ask, Mr. Speaker, that if they too would stand and be welcomed by all honourable members.
Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you and through you to the members of the Assembly the Mayor of the Municipality of Crowsnest Pass, His Worship Dr. John Irwin. The Municipality of Crowsnest Pass was formed in 1979. It is a unique municipal arrangement in the province of Alberta, consisting of 2 towns, 2 villages, an improvement district, and 9 hamlets, brought under one municipal jurisdiction. It's the 3rd largest urban municipality in the province of Alberta in terms of area. I should also note that Dr. Irwin's grandfather served in this assembly as a member from the Calgary area in the 1930s. I'd ask Dr. Irwin to rise and receive the warm welcome of the assembly.
Mr. Speaker, it's not often we receive visitors from Grand Prairie, and it's my pleasure today to introduce our first visitor from Grand Prairie to Alberta's 21st Legislature, Mr. Eric Gerard, the Public Relations Officer for Procter & Gamble Cellulose, and I'd ask Eric to stand and receive the warm welcome of this Legislature.
Mr. Speaker, when my leader asked me to shadow the tourism portfolio, I immediately got on the phone and invited a number of friends from across Canada to come and visit our province. And I'm pleased to introduce to you and through you today to the members of the Assembly from Victoria, a friend that I went to university with, Don Grant. I would ask that he rise and receive the welcome of the Assembly.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct my first question to the Premier, and it has to do with the International Trade Commission in the United States announcing that it will be recommending to the President a 27% countervailing duty on Canadian softwood exports to the U.S., mainly because of low stumpage rates in B.C. My question to the Premier is, given the important implications for the provinces of this, will the Premier now be making a renewed call to the Prime Minister for a provincial seat at the trade table?
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition knows that there is some period of time now before the President must move on this matter, and in fact he may not. Also, Mr. Speaker, the government has had meetings with the federal government and other ministers involved in this matter just recently, as last week in Vancouver. Several government ministers were involved under the direction of our Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, and I would ask him if he'd like to report on that meeting.
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Minister of State responsible for External Affairs, Right Honourable Joe Clark, chaired a meeting in Vancouver attended by representatives of all but one of the provinces. I think Prince Edward Island was the only province not in attendance, and representatives of the union most directly involved in this issue, and industry representatives. At that meeting, a unanimous position was arrived at with the participants to take all steps that are necessary and appropriate to defend against the countervailing measures undertaken by the U.S. industry. With respect to the procedures, there are a number of procedures that have yet to be undertaken, and at each stage the industry, which is the group that will have to respond, will be doing their best to protect the interests of the Canadian softwood lumber industry. I must say, Mr. Speaker, that with respect to the role of the province, we have been requested to answer a questionnaire relative to practices in this province, and we are in the process of compiling that information and have a period of time in which to make that available, and we are doing that in cooperation with the industry and with the union. Mr. Speaker, I would like to say that having attended that meeting and represented the province together with my colleague, the Honourable Minister of Forestry and Wildlife, that it was indeed a remarkable and I think excellent achievement to come forward with the unanimous position of the federal provincial governments, industry, and the trade union, the International Woodworkers, on our role in this ongoing difficult problem facing the industry in Canada.
Supplementary question to either the Premier or the Honourable Minister. It's certainly important to deal with softwood, but this has implications far beyond the softwood energy. My question is, could the Minister be a little more specific in terms of what action that we will be taking? There's unanimous consent. What course of action will we be taking which really would stop the sort of U.S. pressure, if I may say so, on provincial rights here in Canada?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've already indicated the one that we are engaged as a government now in providing the information required in the questionnaire. That is the, as I understand it, the first official step that must be taken in order to supply information relative to practices in the forest industry in this province. And they vary, as the honourable member will be aware, between provinces, and as does the amount of forest lands under provincial control. It will vary between province to province relative to the amount of activities that will have to be taken by the various governments. But certainly, the industry itself in Canada will have to bear the main portion of the defense in the United States, and I can use that term, although it's a quasi-judicial proceeding that we're involved in here. Governments cannot, without seriously, as I understand it, prejudicing the position of the industry in their defense, provide direct funding to assist in the defense, and the federal government has indicated they are not prepared to do that. But certainly there will be measures taken in cooperation as we move through this process. I must add that the Minister of External Affairs is temporarily absent from Canada and has assured all members who participated in the meeting in Vancouver that upon his return he would be in touch with all of us to indicate in more precision the steps that would be undertaken or would be required to be undertaken. And of course, I expect to be hearing from him shortly.
Well, supplementary question to look at in a larger context, Mr. Speaker. Stumpage fees for lumber are somewhat similar, at least, to royalties for Alberta oil and gas. And, of course, Americans are targeting stumpage now, but royalty reduction or energy support programs in Alberta could be next. My question to the Premier is, has Premier asked his officials to drop any contingency plans designed to protect our right to set our own royalty rates?
Mr. Speaker, the government has a history of maintaining a very strong position of keeping our right to set our royalties to Alberta and under our control. I think it's without question in this nation of ours, and we will do whatever is necessary to maintain that.
Supplementary question. I hope Mr. Reisman is aware of that. That's why we think it's so important to have a provincial person at those talks. But my question to the Premier is, does the Premier have a policy recommendation in this area? That is, does the government believe that we should respond with retaliatory duties, or should we make further concessions at the bargaining table as the United States wants?
Mr. Speaker, the whole context of the Honourable Leader of the Opposition's questions merely enforces the need to continue on for a period of time with negotiations on free trade matters with the United States, so that we will not in the future have these protectionist moves, but rather have trade between our two countries covered within an agreement. My position has been that we should continue negotiations with the United States. And those negotiations should go on during the next 2 or 3 months until our ambassador, Reisman, tells us that during this election year in the United States that it is impossible to carry on these negotiations. Now, as of right now, he does not feel that's the case and wishes to continue. We will be having, as the Minister of Federal and Intergovernmental Affairs said, we'll be having meetings constantly with the federal government at the ministerial level. We have a First Minister's meeting coming up to discuss the matter, and we have a Premier's meeting to discuss these matters. I think at any stage, should we feel that we are no longer able to carry on meaningful negotiations because of the protectionist moves in the United States, that we would recommend that the negotiations terminate until after this election year.
Supplementary member for West Loch Sturgeon.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Honourable Minister in charge of intergovernmental affairs with sideline duties of renovating Liberal washrooms. The Minister be able to elaborate on his words necessary and appropriate, whether he's now, in point of view of the royalties affected and the softwood exports in the United States, be prepared to table those studies that the federal government has sent him and the Premier as to what the effects are of free trade sector by sector in Alberta.
Mr. Speaker, the international trade negotiator, Ambassador Reisman, has made available quite a large amount of documentation regarding the impact of the negotiations on various sectors of Canadian trade. They are public, and some aspects, of course, I understand, have been deleted because of the sensitivity of some of the sectors. And I would think those would be available to the Honourable Leader and to any other member of the Assembly. But our Office of the Alberta Trade Representative is certainly prepared to share all public documents, and either the office here in Edmonton or in Calgary will be requested now to make those available to the Honourable Member for West Loch Sturgeon. I won't comment on the other aspect of this question.
Second main question, Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct the second question to the Minister of Social Services. My question is, what are the government's plans with regard to the future of the single man's hostel in Calgary?
Mr. Speaker, as I recall on my visit down to the Calgary region, that was an item that was under discussion as to whether there was a possibility of the more community involvement, but I don't believe a decision has been made on that.
Well, supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. I think there has been a decision made. Maybe the minister would like to get control of her department, because there's been a memorandum sent out where it's clearly that they, from an income security consultant, that says that it will be reduced by 20 beds per month until 1987, and then the bed space will be shut down altogether. My question is then, is the minister saying that this decision hasn't been made? And if so, why is this memorandum going out at this particular time?
Well, Mr. Speaker, once more I find myself in a position of attempting to respond to a question that the honourable member obviously has an internal memorandum. I understand it's from a consultant. We have a lot of consulting work done for the Department of Social Services. If the honourable member would like to give me the information, I'd be pleased to respond.
Well, supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. I'll be glad to file and leave an extra copy for the minister. My question then flowing from this, Mr. Speaker, is this, that I noticed in the budget estimates that there is a small increase in funding support for the Calgary hostel. My question is, why would this be necessary if the government is thinking about shutting down beds, as this memorandum clearly says?
Mr. Speaker, it's a question that probably is more appropriately addressed in the budget process, but because the honourable member leaves some rather interesting innuendo out there, I think it's appropriate to say that we obviously will not abandon our resolve to stand behind those people who are in need of a social service. And if, in fact, we have people in need and they are being served by another organization as opposed to direct line government service, then obviously that other group would have to be funded.
The supplementary question, Mr. Speaker, I'm getting a little upset with the minister. Now, is the minister saying, let me ask the question, is the minister totally unaware of what's going on in her department, as it seemed to be the case last week, or is she deliberately then misleading the House in the answers that she's giving to this Assembly?
Mr. Speaker, I believe that if all honourable members will check Hansard, they will see that accurate information was supplied. And it's a very interesting tactic that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition is using to ask questions that obviously would be difficult immediately to answer without the precise information in front of me. But I would say this. There is a policy to explore all avenues to better deliver services to the public. And I'm sure this is another area where advice has been asked for and given with respect to better serving the public.
A supplementary question to the minister. Could the minister indicate in that review whether two of the alternatives being considered is one, privatization in the form the government uses, or secondly, transferring some of this responsibility for single men's hostels to a private group who would operate and run the hostel service?
Mr. Speaker, the policy of the department has been over the last while to work with community-based organizations primarily who have indicated that they believe they're in a better position to directly serve those people in their communities, and these are the avenues that have been explored.
Member for Cypress Redcliffe.
Mr. Speaker, I wonder if the minister could inform the House of the percentage occupancy in the single men's hostel in Calgary in the last year.
Mr. Speaker, that's a matter of detail that I'll be happy to provide for the honourable member.
Final supplementary on this question, member for Westlock Sturgeon.
Supplementary to the minister, Mr. Speaker, can the minister tell the House what percentage of public funds are going to commercial or non-profit service delivery as opposed to governmental service delivery?
Let's do math. Mr. Speaker, hopefully we can get into that type of detail in the estimates, and obviously that will take some calculating.
Agreed. That's properly a matter for estimates and budget. The Leader of the Liberal Party, question.
Mr. Speaker, to the Premier's statement a month or so ago that Sheikh Yamani had requested that the Premier cut back Alberta's oil production by 10% has now been followed by the contradiction that there's been a 2 million barrel a day increase in OPEC production since April. Now, could the Premier explain why it's only the MP for Edmonton East is taking Alberta's concerns about oil prices directly to the Premier, and why the Premier is not, or directly to the Prime Minister, and why is the Premier not doing so?
Mr. Speaker, surely the member from Westlock Sturgeons can construct a question that I'll be able to give a fair answer to.
Mr. Speaker, I will try again. Outside of using pictures, I'm having trouble, but I lost my comic book and so did he. Could the Premier explain to the members of this legislature why the Honourable Mr. Pat Carney has not received a request from the Premier to rework the terms of the Western Accord so that Albertans' interests are correctly represented?
Mr. Speaker, hoping that he would be able to do it, he has come through. Wonderful. Mr. Speaker, we have not asked the Federal Minister of Energy to reconstruct the Western Accord. That's not a desire of ours. Therefore, why should we ask it? What we want to do is work with the federal government and their Minister of Energy to come up with long-term, meaningful ways to helping our energy industry when it needs help, and yet maintaining risk and reward within that industry that has been so essential to the growth of that industry.
Mr. Speaker, short-term help we want. Would the Premier agree now that he has been double-crossed by the Sheikh and that the super-statesman approach of bypassing Ottawa has failed?
Mr.
Speaker.
You can make whatever inference you wish. You were asking an opinion, so would you?
I would think that the Premier would have tried practicing world diplomacy. I just want to know whether he's going to continue, in point of view of being double-crossed by the Sheikh, whether he's going to continue the approach.
Mr. Speaker, I don't feel in any way that I've been double-crossed by Sheikh Yamani. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, I think it's important that the Leader of Government in Alberta, with the tremendous impact of energy and energy pricing on this province, should always be able to get the best information possible throughout the world. And we do not feel we have to go through Ottawa to do that, nor would we ever. We will get it as quickly as we can. I might say, Mr. Speaker, that my discussions with Sheikh Yamani have been very helpful ones. He has taken a great deal of time to provide me with information. He's done it on numerous occasions, and I have felt grateful to him for the effort he has put in. I am expecting additional calls from him. I'm looking forward to those calls. They help us with our deliberations.
Mr. Speaker, final supplementary. With friends like that, you don't need any enemies. Is the urgency of this matter not driven home when your MP from Edmonton East says that 20,000 Albertans have lost their jobs since February the 1st? Isn't a short-term solution necessary?
Mr. Speaker, I'm unfamiliar with comments from the MP, but I do know that on a general basis, Alberta members of Parliament are very fine representatives of this province and have been working very hard for their constituents, and we appreciate that. But I also know, Mr. Speaker, that there have been very, very difficult circumstances for our energy industry, and we are working closely with them to try and alleviate those circumstances. We have moved ourselves in the area of some $600 million to assist the industry, $100 million in royalty relief, $300 million in exploratory drilling, $200 million in activity incentives. These are very large investments of Alberta's dollars to help the energy industry. We're going to continue to try and help them through this short-term period of adversity. We will do it in any way we can. We would like the federal government, because this is a national problem as well, we would like the federal government to work with us as well. And we will be pursuing that with the federal Minister of... Listen, you asked the question, you don't want to hear the answer? Well, they're just getting a little too lippy over there. As I said, Mr. Speaker, we are working with the federal government. We have raised the matter with the Minister of Energy. Our Minister of Energy is looking forward to working with the federal minister in some cooperative way to help our industry on a longer-term basis. We do know that the energy industry itself is very resilient, and it is moving itself in many ways to strengthen itself to adapt to the current conditions. I'm looking forward with confidence that the energy industry will continue to grow in this province in the future.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question to the Premier with regards to the conversation or the material that comes from the Sheikh. Could the Premier indicate whether there are any indications from that material, whether world prices are stabilized or on increase at the present time, or is that question totally lacking of good concrete information.
Mr. Speaker, the information, the conversations that I've had with Sheikh Yamani, we've agreed would be treated on a confidential nature. The only thing I could say is responding on a general basis, because of wanting to give as much information to a member of this legislature, is that while there might be a period, hopefully not that long, during the 1986 of continued weakness in prices, that by the fall and early winter we should have much stronger prices for energy in the world.
Member for Calgary correspondent.
Mr. Speaker, I'll try not to be lippy in putting this question. In his reply to the question put by the leader of the Liberals, the Premier mentioned that he was looking for long-term, meaningful ways to solve the crisis in the oil industry. Given that there are some upcoming discussions, I wondered if the Premier would be prepared to tell the Assembly just exactly what some of those long-term, meaningful ways might be.
Mr. Speaker, first I congratulate the honourable member for not following the lead of the member from Westlock Sturgeon, and appreciate the fact he's a quick learner. Mr. Speaker, there is such a range of options, some of which I've discussed in the House before, of income stability, lower royalties, a variety of things, Mr. Speaker, that I don't think it'd be particularly helpful to go into them now, but rather to report on them, on any that we feel we can actually move on to the House as quickly as we can.
Leader of the Representative Party.
Mr. Speaker, my question was to the Minister responsible for housing, but I will ask a question to the Minister for Social Services. With regards to a zenith number for battered women across the province of Alberta, there is one in place at the present time for child abuse. Has the Minister considered that type of a zenith line on a province-wide basis?
Mr. Speaker, among a number of options that have been suggested by the Women's Shelter Organization in the province and other organizations as well, there have been a number of areas that seemed appropriate for a zenith line or some type of hookup to a main shelter, if you will. Particularly, and the honourable member does represent one of those areas, much like my own, where people live in a very large geographic area, and we don't have the numbers, unfortunately, we don't have the numbers that would lead to a central place in a reasonable economic basis. It's one of the areas that's being pursued, Mr. Speaker, but it's been done on a regional basis, and I believe it's something that needs to be pulled together in terms of a provincial policy.
Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Hospitality.
No, it's with respect to a supplementary question. I'm on this issue. Supplementary, the member for Edmonton Calder.
Yes, I would just like to ask the Minister a supplementary. When could we expect, if this is being pursued, to have the final process completed?
Mr. Speaker, obviously it has budget implications, and while we've had a very large increase in the funding allocated for the 15 shelters in the province, there was not an allocation made at the time for other services, and so it's something I must explore in terms of savings that may be generated in one part of the department and reallocated if possible.
Member for Stony Plain, followed by the member for Edmonton Beverley.
Mr. Speaker, I have a concern and question for the Minister of Forestry, Lands and Wildlife. Members of my constituency and representatives of the Stony Plain Fish and Game Association have expressed concern that the large fish derbies or fish lotteries are creating an overkill or an unnatural depletion of our fish population. During the recent $100,000 derby at Lake St. Anne, I personally witnessed an exceptionally large number of boats on the lake. Mr. Minister, is your department monitoring this situation? And if so, what is the impact of these events on such an important resource?
Mr. Speaker, yes, my department is monitoring them. We are concerned that too many derbies like this on any one lake could deplete the stock more rapidly than we would wish. With reference to the derby, it is not controlled in the sense of a lottery. It's being considered as a game of skill, not a game of chance, and is not regulated. But we do have and do encourage anyone, and would encourage you and all the members in the House that if in your communities you're having these derbies, to promote the catch and release aspect tied to these derbies. And the Alberta Fish and Game Club themselves have this year came forward and are using that in their big fish derby. So it's a very positive way to handle the derbies.
Supplemental question, Mr. Speaker. Could the minister comment, this event, for example, is on Lake St. Anne has grown to 3 events annually. If this number continues to grow, is the department prepared to restrict or prohibit these events?
Under the present legislation, we have no way of controlling the number of events. It would have to take regulations or additional change in the Federal Fisheries Act. We try to work with proponents of these derbies to not be a large user of the resource, and very actively, as I mentioned before, promoting the catch and release. On top of that, Mr. Speaker, we have increased in the last number of years our stocking program throughout the province. Fortunately, Lac St. Anne has a natural producing lake, but we do stock some 290 lakes in the province, and very actively have increased that. Hopefully this year, when the Coal Lake fish hatchery comes on, and when it gets into full production, we're going to be able to enlarge that again. We're really increasing our resource in that way.
For Clover Bar.
Speaker, the Honourable Minister, supplementary question. When the Cold Lake hatchery comes on stream, is the Minister or the Department looking at an additional hatchery for the northwest part of the province? Because, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, he is well aware that the northern pike and perch, the native fish that we have in the province, are probably the most outstanding game fish. Is the Department looking down the road to increasing or doubling or tripling the size of hatcheries for native fish in the northwestern part of the province?
Mr. Speaker, it gives me an opportunity to encourage all members of the legislature to, during the estimates, to support the idea. I know our department will very definitely would appreciate an increase. But to give you some background on the numbers, I think in 1982 we had something like about 5.8 million fish being put into lakes. This year we're about over the 9 million. When Coal Lake comes into, we'll be up to 35 million when it's up to full stream. We are servicing a lot more communities, and we'd like to have that increase. We're not up to any place near what some of our southern neighbors are, though, so it is something we should be looking at as a tourist and a good recreation resource in the future.
Final supplementary, the member for Westlock Sturgeon.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Fisheries. Can he tell us whether he has any recent figures whether the program of raising the level of Lesser Slave Lake has increased the fish count up there in view of the fact that maybe hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of acres of farmland was flooded in order to raise the level?
Mr. Speaker, there is a study going on, and there has been some work done. I haven't got it at my fingertips, but the fishery at Lesser Slave Lake, as far as walleye, has definitely increased, and the sport fishery in the last number of years has been fantastic fishing, as the reports I get. We do have concerns with the amount of commercial fishing that's being done, and there's controversy between the users of the resource, and it's nice to be in that position compared to what it was in 1970.
Final supplementary on this matter, the member for Edmonton-Glengarry.
Speaker, Lesser Slave Lake is in my constituency, and the member for Westlock Sturgeon might like to know that we didn't raise the lake and flood a lot of farmland.
The Honourable Minister, that point of order to come at the end of the question period in any event. Perhaps you can invite him fishing later. Edmonton-Glengarry, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will try to keep my question on the topic of fishing derbies, where we started, and that is, has the minister considered promoting the catch and release philosophy by, in fact, using special reduced daily catch limits that apply to fishing derbies?
Yes, the department is continually making changes. There's a major change being requested to our fishing regulations. It's presently in Ottawa, and hopefully next year you will see some major changes in the timing, and the catch and release aspect is drastically being increased throughout those regulations.
Member for Edmonton-Beverly, followed by the member for Edmonton-Gold Bar.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to direct my question to the Minister of Community and Occupational Health. The provisions in the Department's 1981 Act provides for a maximum base figure of $675 per month for lifetime compensable accidents payments. My question to the Minister then is, given the fact that there has been a 24% increase in the cost of living between 1981 and 1985, with no changes to the amounts being payable to the injured workers, does the Minister intend to introduce legislation in this session that will provide a cost of living increase for those disabled workers?
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for his question. That, as well as a number of other representations, have been made to the provincial government with respect to an increase in pensions payable to recipients of workers' compensation pension benefits. It is a matter, Mr. Speaker, that I'm reviewing with my caucus and cabinet colleagues, and it's a matter that has not yet been decided, but I hope to be making a decision on the matter in the days ahead.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Can the Minister confirm that there is a proposed legislation floating around your department somewhere, and if it is, what's holding it up from being presented at this session?
Mr. Speaker, I believe I've answered the question.
It's anticipatory. Further supplementary?
The Minister won't assure us that there is proposed legislation, Mr. Speaker. What other steps has he taken to address this injustice?
That's another. Just reading it.
Mr. Speaker, again, I believe I've answered the question.
Perhaps the member for Edmonton-Beverly could frame another question, please.
What is the government's position then on lump sum payments to claimants in that particular since 1981 who have been and have not received the required funding because of the increase in the cost of living and have lost purchasing power? What is the Minister's intention to do to rectify that situation?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the government's position on the matter of lump sum payments for workers' compensation pensioners is one that after the select committee of the legislature regarding workers' compensation in the last session of the legislature, that committee came forward with some very strong recommendations that we move more in the direction of lump sum payments. And just as it is this government's philosophy and principle that every single person in this province should make decisions for themselves, the practice of lump sum payments is quite in keeping with that philosophy and that principle. So, Mr. Speaker, I hope to be able to encourage the board, as I believe it has done, to move more and more in the direction of lump sum payments for pensioners.
Member for Okay, supplementary, the member for Calgary-Buffalo.
Supplementary to the minister, Mr. Speaker. In light of widespread worker dissatisfaction and restiveness, including hunger strikes in Calgary, is the minister planning any steps to restore badly needed worker confidence in the workers' compensation system?
Mr. Speaker, I've had the opportunity now to meet with members of the Workers' Compensation Board and staff at the board, and I believe that they are very, very aware of the concern and are very sensitive to it, and it is a matter that they are looking at very carefully, and we will continue, as I say, continue to provide responsive, sensitive, and responsible service to those who are beneficiaries of workers' compensation.
Member for Edmonton Goldbar, the member for Lethbridge West.
Speaker, could I ask the Minister, is it the intent, or the Premier, is it the intention of this government to strike a select committee on worker compensation for the 21st legislature?
Yes, it is, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Edmonton Goldbar, followed by the member for Grand Prairie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Social Services. Since there's evidence of a move towards commercialization of social services through such things as commercial daycare, job clubs, and so on, would the Minister explain why the government is proceeding with contracting out the operation of services to people without a public policy developed through public input?
Mr. Speaker, I believe that commercialization is not a term that I would use to express the policy of the Department of Social Services. The main area that the contracts exist, in fact, are in the area of the major community organizations that are delivering services. There has been some experimentation. For instance, and the honourable member mentioned the job club area, and several of those have been extraordinarily successful, far more successful than any program that had been delivered by the department before. And I think the honourable member would agree that when people in the public sphere out there in private sector or community organizations have good ideas that are worthy of pursuit, that in fact we should be investigating those ideas. But Mr. Speaker, there is very little, in quotes, commercialization. There is a lot of publicization, if you will, I'm not sure what the term should be, with respect to community organizations who are assuming by way of contracts and grants more and more of the services located in their communities.
Mr. Speaker, a supplementary. I'm not sure I understood the minister correctly. Is there then, in fact, a policy in the department for contracting out of government services either to non-profit or commercial centres?
Mr. Speaker, we continue to explore better ways to deliver services to the people of Alberta. The greatest role being played by people in the community, individuals and community organizations who identify needs in their community, come forward and ask to work with us in order that those programs can be funded. And Mr. Speaker, that is where the greatest effort is being made, and we will continue to, on an experimental basis, as good ideas are brought forward, to try to endeavour to explore those ideas or possibly put them in on an experimental basis.
Mr. Speaker, to the minister, then since there appears to be a move towards developing standards, will there be a public discussion of such standards and the proposed implementation before any further contracts are let?
Mr. Speaker, there is a working group that has been for some period continuing to upgrade standards. And the various organizations, many of them are judged by their peers, many of them are judged by organizations outside the province and outside the country when speaking to accreditation. And I'm very, very proud of all the organizations, and the honourable member will be aware of so many that, for instance, are located in the city of Edmonton, the Western Industrial Research Training Centre, Catholic Social Services, the Goodwill People, the Association of Human Services in Alberta, the Alberta Association for the Mentally Retarded, the Good Samaritan Society. All of them are delivering enormous services in this province, all with high-quality standards, all wanting continually to upgrade those standards.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, a final supplementary. Back to commercialized services. What requirements presently exist, will the Minister tell us, for suppliers of commercialized service delivery to provide an accounting for funds each fiscal year?
Well, Mr. Speaker, once again, the honourable member seems to be implying that we have a lot of commercialized services. The honourable member mentioned daycare, and I think that's an appropriate example to use, because there are both public daycares, community organizations who promote and are responsible for daycares, as well as private sector daycares. The decision about where children will attend in respect of daycares and family day homes, Mr. Speaker, is made by the parents. And we have to obviously demand accountability for spaces that are utilized by way of our operating grant, and we have to speak to the accountability with respect to the standards that are in place for purposes of licensing. But in the end, Mr. Speaker, parents are the ones who will judge where the best places are for their children.
Supplementary, the member for Edmonton-Calder.
Supplementary to the Minister. In view of the fact that there is greater involvement being shifted to the community, I'm wondering if the department is willing to hold public hearings on the whole area and perhaps involve and get input from the public, from clients, from social workers.
Mr. Speaker, I can assure you that all the organizations, the clients that are being served, many social workers who work for a lot of the organizations that I've identified, and that's only a small portion, are all a part of the ongoing discussions in terms of the better service of clients. And in particular, Mr. Speaker, for those clients who are... You're looking in the mirror, Mr. Leader of the Opposition.
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, there is wide and ongoing consultation, and if the honourable member would like to, for instance, have a discussion with the Association of Human Services in Alberta, who plays a major role in these ongoing discussions, the honourable member will find that they are very satisfied with the consultation. There has been major consultation going on since 1983. And what may be the concern that the honourable member has is that the honourable member may not be happy with the results of some of the consultation, but I can assure the honourable member that the organizations are.
I apologize to the member for Grand Prairie. We have now gone 3 minutes past question period. I had recognized that member. Is the House willing to entertain this series of questions? Member for Grand Prairie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister responsible for utilities, and is to do with the Rural Electrification Associations in Alberta. And I'd like to have him tell us what the status is of the master agreements which have been under construction in Alberta between rural electrification associations and the utility companies.
Mr. Speaker, with regard to the master agreement that is presently in its final stages with the power companies, that's TransAlta Utilities and Alberta Power, my understanding is that the joint committee has reached the point of dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and that in the Alberta Power region, 89 contracts have been signed. In total, 89 contracts have been signed, 45 of them in the Alberta Power region, 44 of which have been signed by both parties. In the TransAlta region, 42 contracts have been signed, but are awaiting the signature of the power companies who want to sit down with them and discuss or explain some of the features, I would suggest that they look at them as quickly as possible and sign them in the interests of working together.
A supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Has there been reluctance on behalf of the signers to sign these agreements, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, I guess in the past there has been a reluctance. I think part of that stems from the original negotiations that took place between the REAs and the power companies relative to the new master agreement. That is behind us, and my understanding is they have reached a general agreement with the contracts and will be signing them shortly.
Today, with respect to question period, we have gone through 39 questions, and we have left 6 members waiting in the wings to be able to enter question period. I have a note that the Honourable Minister of Federal Intergovernmental Affairs would like to supplement a question which was raised in question period yesterday. Is there concurrence of the House?
Mr. Speaker, the matter arose from a question asked today by the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. In his preamble, he indicated that the decision by the International Trade Commission was now before the President of the United States. Mr. Speaker, that is not accurate. There are several steps that must yet be taken before any determination of the main issue is concluded, and it will probably not be until October of this year before a final determination might be made by the Department of Commerce in the United States. For the benefit of members of the Assembly, I am proposing to undertake, because of the importance of this industry to Alberta, to provide all honourable members with an outline of the process that will have to be undertaken during the course of this countervail hearing. I trust that all members will find that to be of use in terms of following this subject over the next several months.
Question period, I said we'll be recommending, and I know the process. It's semi-judicial. My understanding is they have to make a decision by December the 4th.
I'm sorry, Honourable Leader of the Opposition, we can't engage in responses to information that has been supplied. Next day would be ample opportunity during question period.
That's why.
Honourable Member for Clover Bar, whether you think it's wrong or not, that's the decision of this House. Orders of the day.